I'm close to 50 now, but this happened almost 10 years ago. At that time, my daughter was 16, and I spent every single day of my life working just to keep her safe and give her a future. People might read this and dismiss it as just another creepy story, but I know what I saw, and I know what I lived through. It was real. Back then, I worked as a night janitor at a university. It wasn't glamorous, far from it. But after my divorce, bills piled up. My daughter's school expenses were endless. And after working a daytime part-time job, this was the only night shift I could find. During the day, the university was alive. Thousands of students and professors rushing through the halls, chatter echoing everywhere, the sound of laughter spilling out of classrooms. But once the sun set and the clock struck 8, everything changed. The hallways went silent. The warm glow of the lights cast long shadows on the walls. And in those hours, you could almost swear the building itself was breathing. There were many buildings on campus, but the one I had to spend most of my time in was the art building. In the daylight, it was beautiful. Paintings, portraits, sculptures, creativity everywhere. But at night, those same portraits didn't look inspiring anymore. They looked like they were watching you. And I promise you, I am not exaggerating. That feeling sank all the way into my spine every time I stepped into that place. The first strange thing happened on a Wednesday night. I was mopping the gallery hallway when my eyes landed on a portrait I'd seen dozens of times before. It was of a woman's face, painted in an almost hyper-realistic style. But that night, something about it was different. It looked like her head was tilted in a way I'd never noticed before. I walked closer, thinking maybe the frame had slipped or was hanging crooked. No, it was perfectly straight. I even touched it to make sure. Everything was fine, but when I stepped back and looked again, the eyes were staring directly at me. My heart started pounding. I blinked hard and looked again. The portrait was normal. I tried to convince myself I was just tired, but deep down, uneasiness had already taken root. The following night, in that same corridor, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate steps, coming closer. I turned, expecting to see a student who had stayed late. There was no one. The steps stopped the second I looked. These little things kept happening. Sometimes a sculpture's shadow seemed to shift, as if the thing had moved when I wasn't looking. Sometimes the portraits seemed to glint, as though their eyes caught the light in ways they never should have. But one night in the bathroom, things got worse. I was cleaning the stalls when I heard it, a faint sobbing, a woman crying softly from one of the stalls. I froze. My hand trembled as I pushed open the stall door. Empty. The crying stopped. I looked up at the mirror, and what I saw made my blood run cold. My reflection was there, but it wasn't right. Its head was tilted at a strange angle, and its eyes weren't looking at me. They were staring past me, at something over my shoulder. I squeezed my eyes shut, took a deep breath, and when I opened them again, the reflection was normal. I whispered to myself, "Margaret, calm down. It's just stress," but it wasn't just once. The same thing happened again and again. One night I finally gathered the courage to ask the old security guard, "Has anything unusual ever happened in here?" He lowered his eyes and said quietly, "There used to be a woman janitor here. Years ago. She disappeared one night. Nobody ever found her." A chill ran all the way through me. I wanted to ask more, but he changed the subject immediately. It starts affecting my life. It wasn't just at the university anymore. At home, I was restless, uneasy. My daughter noticed. She asked me one morning, "Mom, are you okay? You've been walking around in your sleep a lot lately." I brushed it off, but the truth was, she was right. I'd been having dreams. The same one over and over. I was standing in the art building bathroom staring into the mirror. And in the mirror, I wasn't alone. There was another me, a duplicate, watching me. Everything came to a climax on a Friday night. I was in the gallery mopping when the lights suddenly flickered and went out. Emergency lights glowed faintly, painting the hallway in dim red shadows. I grabbed my bucket and hurried toward the bathroom. But as I walked, the hallway seemed to stretch. The further I went, the longer it became. The portraits lining the walls. I swear they turned as I passed, their painted eyes following me. I pushed into the bathroom. The door slammed shut behind me with a force that rattled the frame. Darkness. And then I saw it. In the mirror. My duplicate. It looked exactly like me. Same uniform, same tired face. But the eyes were wrong. They were pitch black. It tilted its head and whispered in a voice that was almost my own. "You took my place." I froze. My throat went dry. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. The lights flickered once, and then everything drowned in darkness. The next thing I remember, I was waking up in a hospital bed. They told me they found me unconscious in the bathroom. My supervisor said, "You were hallucinating, Margaret. Stress, exhaustion. That's all." But I know better. It wasn't a hallucination. That duplicate, that woman, was real. And the most disturbing part? A few weeks later, someone from HR casually mentioned, "You were lucky, Margaret. You got this job because the last janitor suddenly disappeared." That was when it all clicked. I wasn't just another worker, I was a replacement. And whoever's place I had taken, she was still there. Now 10 years have passed. I don't work there anymore. But even now, sometimes when I walk down an empty hallway, I catch movement in the glass. A second me, watching, waiting. And I can't shake the feeling that one day, she'll drag me back with her. My name is Howard, and even today I struggle to accept that what I saw inside that school basement was real. But whether I believe it or not doesn't change anything. Every time I close my eyes, it all plays back in front of me again, as if I never left that place. I was middle-aged back then, around 44 years old. My marriage had already fallen apart, my wife had left, and my daughter lived with her in another city. I lived alone in a small apartment, and life was just about paying bills and surviving day by day. That's when I got offered a night janitor job. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough. The location? An old high school building that had been officially shut down years ago. The school was once one of the biggest in the city, but funding slowly dried up, accidents happened, and rumors began spreading about students getting injured or disappearing near the basement. Eventually, the school was closed. Now the building was used just for storing old records and equipment. The city needed someone to clean and maintain it at night. I thought, a job is a job. And honestly, the idea of working alone at night suited me. I wasn't much of a social guy anyway, so I said yes. On my first night, the main floors looked exactly how you'd expect. Abandoned. Dusty chairs, desks, broken lockers, everything frozen in time, untouched for years. But the real problem was the basement. To get there, you had to go down a rusted iron stairwell, which opened into a pitch-black corridor. The first time I shined my flashlight down there, it looked less like a basement and more like a never-ending tunnel. Inside, there were broken chairs, stacks of old files, outdated lab equipment, and massive boilers. The air was thick, damp, and heavy, almost like it was hard to breathe. At first, things seemed normal. I'd bring my mop and bucket, clean the floors, collect trash, then head down to the basement to sweep. But the vibe in the basement was wrong. The first time I noticed something off, it was footsteps. I could clearly hear a second pair of steps echoing mine. When I stopped, the sound stopped. When I moved again, it moved too. But whenever I spun my flashlight around, nothing. On another night, I heard lockers slamming shut in the distance. I told myself it was just the metal contracting with the damp air. But the next day, when I casually mentioned it to another janitor, the one who worked day shifts, he looked at me and said, "Don't hang around the basement too long. They say some of the kids never left from there." I laughed it off, but deep inside, the unease grew stronger. In one corner of the basement, there was a locked door labeled records room. My supervisor told me I didn't need to clean it, just maintain the outside. But I've always been a curious guy. One night I tried the handle, and to my surprise, the lock was loose. The door creaked open. Inside were shelves stacked with old student files, handwritten reports, and black and white photos. I picked up one random file and froze. It read, "Student missing, last seen near basement, case unsolved." Chills ran through my body. I grabbed another photo. It was a class picture. except one of the children's faces had been scratched out entirely. That night, I didn't even finish my shift. I just left. For a few days, things stayed quiet. Then one night, while mopping near the boilers, the overhead light started to flicker. At first, I thought it was just faulty wiring, but in the middle of the flicker, I saw it. At the far end of the corridor stood a small, shadowy figure. I swung my flashlight toward it. Nothing was there. Later that night, I went into the bathroom and looked at the mirror. My reflection was delayed, like it wasn't moving in sync with me, almost like it was its own separate entity. I tried to convince myself it was just stress, but sleeping at night became harder and harder. Then came the night that changed everything. I was in the basement, sweeping near the boilers, when I heard it. A faint sound, the giggle of a child. "Hello? Anyone here?" I called out. No response. Then I heard footsteps, small ones like a child running barefoot across the floor. My flashlight darted left and right, but I couldn't see anything. Suddenly, the row of lockers began slamming shut, one after the other, as if someone invisible was banging them closed. My heart pounded. I grabbed my equipment and headed for the stairwell. But when I reached it, the stairwell was gone. No matter how far I walked forward, it seemed to stretch away from me, like the basement was pulling me deeper. Then I felt it. Someone standing right behind me. I spun around and saw him. A little boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old. His eyes were nothing but hollow black pits, and he held a torn teddy bear in his hands. His lips curled into a smile. In a whisper, he said, "You shouldn't be here. He's still hungry." At that exact moment, a deafening metallic bang echoed from the boilers. A massive shadow spread across the wall, growing taller and taller until it towered over me. Its shape was distorted, inhuman, shifting like smoke but solid at the same time. I screamed and ran. This time the stairwell was back. I bolted up, slammed the door shut, and didn't stop running until I was outside. The very next morning, I handed in my resignation. "There's something wrong in that basement," I told my supervisor. He just sighed and said, "You lasted longer than most." A few months ago, another janitor went missing. We never found him. Cold sweat rolled down my neck. I never went back. Even years later, whenever I hear about basements or damp abandoned places, my chest tightens. Because I know, whatever was in that basement wasn't human, and it's still there, waiting for the next janitor. For the past 10 years, I've worked as a janitor in different hospitals. Life was never easy. My husband died in a sudden accident when I was only 32, and my 2 kids were still in school. To keep food on the table, I had no choice but to take whatever job came my way. Nights, weekends, holidays. If it paid even a little, I took it. Some jobs were manageable. Others broke me down. But one I still regret to this day. It was an old psychiatric hospital built in the 1940s. Once it had housed hundreds of patients. But times changed. New facilities were built, and the old place slowly shut down. Officially, the hospital was closed, but certain parts of the building were still used. Storage rooms, a small clinic, and the main administrative wing. The rest was abandoned, long hallways, empty wards, silent rooms that once echoed with screams. My duty was almost always at night. During the day, a skeleton staff would come and go, but at night, the whole building belonged to me. The supervisor warned me the first day, "Just stick to your route. Don't wander into the old East Wing." I asked why. He said, "Unsafe. Old structure." But the look in his eyes, it wasn't about bricks or ceilings. It was fear. The first few nights were fine. Quiet. Too quiet. I'd push my mop bucket down the long corridors, listening to the squeak of the wheels echo against the walls. My routine was simple. Clean the floors, empty trash bins, disinfect the bathrooms, make notes in the logbook. But every time I passed near the East Wing door, I felt it. A heavy smell. Damp, mold, like a basement after a flood. And always a rush of cold air, as if someone had opened a freezer door. I told myself it was just bad ventilation. Old pipes, nothing unusual. But then came the night when I saw her. At the very end of the corridor, just past the glow of the exit sign, a woman in a white hospital gown, hair falling across her face. She stood perfectly still. I called out, nervous but polite, "Excuse me? Are you lost?" No response. I blinked once. She was gone. I told myself my eyes were playing tricks, but deep down, I knew they weren't. Routine and restlessness. Weeks passed. I settled into a routine. I'd clock in, greet the night guard, grab my supplies and start working. Sometimes around midnight, I'd sit in the staff lounge with instant coffee, staring out the cracked window at the empty parking lot. My kids would be asleep at home, and I'd feel the weight of their future pressing down on me. I had no choice but to keep working. But the East Wing was always on my mind. I'd pass its heavy doors and feel something pulling at me, like the building itself wanted me to go inside. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I pushed open the door to the East Wing. Surprisingly, it wasn't locked. Inside, the air was colder, heavier. My flashlight beam cut through thick dust. The wards were lined with rusted bed frames, peeling paint, and walls marked with dark stains that looked too much like blood. In one room, I found an old table covered in files. Most were too fragile to touch, but I picked one up. Patient number 47, female, died during treatment, cause unexplained. I froze. The pages inside described violent outbursts, self-inflicted wounds, and finally, patient expired after restraint malfunction. Staff unable to explain. My hands trembled as I shoved the file back and left, but it was too late. I had woken something up. After that, things changed. When I cleaned, I'd hear footsteps following me, but when I turned, the hallway was empty. When I emptied bins, I'd hear whispers close to my ear. "Help me, please." Once I looked down at the floor and froze. My shadow was moving, its arm lifting, while I stood perfectly still. I ran straight to the supervisor's office and told him everything. His face went pale. He sighed and said quietly, "Stay out of the East Wing." That's all. But his voice was shaking. He knew. One stormy night, rain pounded the hospital windows. The power flickered, and the backup lights hummed. As I pushed my mop past the East Wing, the door creaked open by itself. Cold air rushed out, stronger than ever. My gut told me to walk away, but I couldn't. I stepped inside. The room seemed darker, the shadows thicker. My flashlight caught glimpses of faces, quick, pale flashes, then nothing. The air buzzed with whispers. Suddenly, my mop slipped from my hand. I bent to grab it and heard breathing, heavy, right behind me. I spun around, empty. I ran out of the wing, heart pounding, the worst night of my life. It was just after 2 a.m. I was near the East Wing when the power went out completely. Pitch black. My flashlight was my only lifeline. I turned it on and froze. The hallway ahead was filled with figures in white gowns, at least a dozen. Their faces were scarred, their eyes hollow black pits. They started walking toward me. My legs wouldn't move. One figure stepped forward, a woman taller than the rest. Her face was burned, melted, skin hanging in ribbons. She screamed at me, "You took my place!" The door slammed shut behind me. I darted under an old hospital bed, shaking uncontrollably. Their footsteps echoed closer. Then, right beside me, a whisper. "We see you, Elena." The bed above me moved on its own, screeching across the floor. I was exposed. They all stood over me, reaching down with burned, twisted hands. I screamed and shut my eyes. And then, silence. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the main corridor, alone, mop in hand, like nothing had happened. But my clothes were soaking wet, like I had been dragged underwater. Aftermath. The next morning I quit. I didn't even wait for my paycheck. The supervisor only shook his head and said, "You're not the first. That hospital doesn't let janitors stay for long." I never went back. But even now, years later, I still see her sometimes. When I close my eyes, when the house is silent, when the kids are asleep, the burned-faced woman standing at my bedside, watching the end.